Welcome back, Scroll and Sword. Today we are reading Mark chapter 5 through 8, and we are slowing down and looking at Mark 8:27 through 30, where Peter confesses that Jesus is the Christ at Caesarea Philippi. And the setting of this scripture and culture absolutely matters. Caesarea Philippi was saturated with pagan worship and imperial symbolism, and it was in a place marked by competing claims of lordship. And Jesus asked this, "Who do people say that I am?" And the disciples report the speculation. Some say you're John the Baptist. Some say you're the prophet Elijah reborn. You're one of the prophets. Each answer actually is honoring Jesus, but none of them actually reach far enough into reality. And then Jesus, he sharpens it. But you, who do you say that I am? And in the Greek, you is plural. This is a corporate question to the 12 as the nucleus of restored Israel. Peter answers this as the spokesman. You are the Christ. And Christos in Greece means anointed one, corresponding to the Hebrew word Messiah. But in the first century expectation, Messiah did not automatically mean divine son who suffers and rises. It's more meant to be a Davidic deliverer in their context, in their culture, and it meant restoration. And for many, it meant Rome, the empire of the day, pushed out, and Israel exalted, God's chosen children exalted. But Peter's confession is true, but it's still not deep enough, and that's why Jesus immediately commands silence. This is not because the title is wrong, Christos, but because it is easily misunderstood. A Messiah without a cross becomes a nationalist hero. A Messiah without suffering becomes a political instrument. And Mark will now redefine the title through rejection, through death, and through resurrection. And you got to notice the narrative shift here, because up to this point in Mark chapter 8, Mark has pressed the question of identity after this confession. And Jesus immediately predicts his passion, his death. And the question moves from who is he to what kind of a Messiah is he, and what does it mean to follow him? You know, there's a subtle canonical tension here. In 2 Samuel 7, God promises a Davidic king. In Isaiah 53, the servant suffers. Jewish expectation often separated these strands. In Jesus, they converge. The anointed king is also the suffering servant. And let me try to break it down with a picture. Like, imagine someone finally recognizing a brilliant surgeon saying, you're the one who could save lives. True. But if they expect that surgeon to lead a political revolution instead of entering an operating room, they misunderstand the mission of the surgeon. The title is correct, but the expectation, it's distorted. And here in Mark, he presents Jesus as the true Messiah, but a Messiah defined by suffering before glory. And correct confession must be joined with correct understanding. And this anointed king is also the rejected servant. An identity without the cross produces distortion. That's why if you hear of doctrines circulating the church these days that put Jesus at the forefront, but it's a Jesus that is without the cross. You know, some progressive Christians these days, they don't like the idea of the violence behind the cross. And they use the excuse, oh, God would not be so violent against his own son because he loves. But a Jesus without the cross is a distortion of who he is. And it's actually not who he is. It's a broken identity. And any Jesus who is not the true Jesus is a false Jesus. So it is possible to confess Jesus rightly and still misunderstand him deeply. We may want a Messiah who fixes systems without confronting sin, who wins power without bearing wounds. But Mark invites us to let Jesus define his own mission. Following the Christ means following a king whose crown passes through the cross. Love you guys. See you in the discussion room.